Harwich Conservation Commission for July 1st, 2020. The meeting is being held with remote participation, and the public is welcome to access the meeting on channel 18. It's broadcast live now. So I'm going to read a statement from the Governor Baker's office on these type of open meetings. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission on July 1st, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so via a recording on demand on the Harwich Channel 18 website or on our Town of Harwich YouTube page. So welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. And the first item on our agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 32 Dunes Road, Map 5, Parcel W1-52. It is a proposal to construct a master bedroom addition, interior renovations, construction of an elevator within the existing building footprint, reconfiguration of walkways and shell driveway, landscaping in the eastern part of the yard, and removal and replacement of a brick walkway in the southern portion of the yard. Is there a representative of the project here tonight?
Yes, it's me, Stacy Kanega, the engineer from Coastal Engineering. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right. Well, I apologize for being in my very dark basement, but upstairs is very loud with children. So I'm here representing the owner and applicant, Thomas and Caroline Lucy, for the subject property, 32 Dunes Road. The property is located in a residential area and is bounded by Dunes Road to the south, Nons Road to the northeast, and Allen Harbor to the west. The proposed project area within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetland resource area is approximately just a little over 49,000 square feet. And this area is obviously extensively developed with an existing 2-story single-family home, a shell drive with cobble edge, first and second story decks with outdoor kitchen and patio area, various walkways consisting of materials like brick, stone, pavers, and maintained landscape areas such as lawns, planters, and ornamental trees. The existing property is served by a 7-bedroom Title V sewage disposal system, and that is partially located within the vicinity of the project area. The distribution box and soil absorption system are located in the lawn area with a small portion of that soil absorption system under the shell driveway. I'll explain later that the D-box and the soil absorption system are located outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. The septic tank and pump chamber are located in a separate concrete driveway in planter area facing Nons Road and is located away from this area of work. Flood zones for the property are the FEMA Flood Zone X and the Zone AE, which has an elevation of 11. Resource areas that we're located in for this project are the 100-foot buffer zone to land subject to coastal storm flowage, and the 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank. And we are located outside of the 50-foot no disturb zone as defined in the Harwich wetland regulations. If you all recall, prior to going into quarantine, I was actually before you for a request for determination back in February, early February, that we were approved for to improve the navigable walking paths from the driveway areas to the main dwelling entrance that actually faces Nons Road, but just wanted you to be aware This work is essentially on kind of the back side of the house now, as opposed to that was on the front and a little closer to the wetland area. The proposed project area, as I just mentioned, is generally on the, is in a side yard facing the east of Butter, which is the east yard. And then there's a little bit of work proposed south of the dwelling facing Dunes Road that I'll go over in a minute. And if you can see with, compared to the buffer zones, overall the project, the existing dwelling actually is in between the wetland resource areas and the proposed work, and essentially acts as a buffer between the work and the wetland areas, with the exception of there's a small brick walkway that will be replaced with a different material, again, south of the building, and generally located in its existing location of the walkway. The proposed improvements for this project include interior improvements, which is renovation of an existing master bedroom and entry area, and the installation of an elevator under the existing building footprint. And as far as exterior improvements go, there is a proposed addition for the master bedroom that's approximately 107 plus or minus square feet in that east yard area is where it will extend. And as far as the site improvements go, there's going to be, the walkways will be reconfigured along with that shell driveway and cobble edge, and the landscaping will be reconfigured in that eastern yard. And then on the south side of the property, or south side of the dwelling, there's an existing U-shaped brick walkway that will generally be replaced in its generally same location with just a little different material to match the pavers and such that are installed in other areas of the site. As I mentioned, the Title V system, there will be no increase in flow, and with all the reconfigurations of the driveways and such, it will need to be updated to accommodate H20 loading. But again, the existing system and the proposed system will all be located outside of that 100-foot buffer zone. Overall, there should be a net reduction of coverage area that's shown on the plan of 129 square feet within that 100-foot buffer zone. And overall, the lawn within the 100-foot buffer zone will be reduced by 150 square feet. There is a request for variance as part of this application, as the work is proposed within the 100-foot buffer zone to that coastal bank and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Key takeaways from this application are that, again, we're in these buffer zones to the coastal bank and land subject to coastal storm flowage. And therefore, we don't feel that we're going to be resulting in a change to the coastal bank itself or the land subject to coastal storm flowage. The property is obviously extensively developed under the existing conditions with the buildings, hardscapes, maintained lawn and landscaping, and therefore we do not feel that there's anticipated to be an adverse effect on the wetland resource areas. And as I mentioned, the building does actually serve as a buffer for a majority of the work between the work area itself and those wetland resource areas. And in conclusion, we would request a negative determination for this request of determination of applicability be granted. But I know you have a lot of detailed information sitting in front of you. So with that, I open it up to any questions that you all may have.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure. So that was a great presentation. This plan really shows not only what was approved prior and existing, but also what they want to do now. And I think it's a good idea to have everything that's on there from prior permits. It's a really accurate plan of record for what is and what will be on the site. It is a very busy site. So I think kind of melding everything from previous permits to current is key, with the exception of there is a dock on the property, but that extends well beyond the scope of anything we're talking about here. So, as Stacy said, all this work is on the southeast side of the house, and the house is between it and the resource area, which is a coastal bank. It's a very shallow coastal bank. And the performance standards for coastal bank are storm damage prevention and flood control. And I don't see how what they're proposing is going to have any impact to those interests. So she stated the project actually results in a net reduction of hardscape within the 100-foot buffer. Nothing's proposed in the 50. The closest point is a brick walkway, which is going to be replaced in the same footprint with stone. And that is just over 60 feet from the resource. And because they have a reduction, no mitigation is proposed, and in my opinion, none is required. They already have a no chemical application condition on the previous permit, but you can put it on as well if you wish. And I would recommend approval with a -3 determination.
Thank you, Amy. Quick question up front. It wasn't clear to me why a variance was needed for this type of change. Do you want to quickly describe why one is needed?
Actually, I was going to ask Stacy that. I don't view it as a variance being needed for this.
Okay. I think I had one before for work within the 50 foot. I believe I read it as the 100 as well. So that can be struck. I guess I was interpreting it because we were in the 100 that we'd also have to have one.
It's not a big deal. You don't need to like resubmit anything. But technically, no, they don't need a variance for this.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
It just makes it a little bit easier, so that's fine. Okay, well, I'll ask the commissioners for questions. I'm going to start with you, Stan.
I guess I got to sign on later next time. No, I don't have any questions. We've seen this property before, as we talked about. We approved some other work on this area. Looks okay to me, and we're reducing the square footage within the 100, so I'm fine with this.
Okay, thanks. Don, you're next.
Yeah, hi. I don't have any comments really. I guess just that I do think we should make sure we put the no chemical application within the 100 on this as well. That looks like there are ornamentals and other things being planted there, so we need to make sure that we make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, Ernie, you're up.
I have no comments. It looks fine to me.
Okay, and then Jim.
Amy, in your opinion, did it seem like fertilizer or herbicide was being used anywhere on the property?
It still does look pretty green, so I was going to reach out to the homeowner and then follow up with an additional letter to this determination if you vote on it tonight, reminding them. But I was going to follow up with the homeowner because I did notice that it still looked as if it might be being treated.
Yeah, it still appears to be a fertilized and chemically treated lawn, and maybe some of the plantings as well. And I think, it could be important to upgrade update the language, make sure it's our kind of boilerplate language that includes any reseeding must be done with a native mix. Yeah, that's my only comment.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Any comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none. If there are no additional comments, then we could have a motion from one of the commissioners.
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA for 32 Duns Road for construction of the master bedroom addition, interior renovations, construction of elevator within the existing building footprint, and reconfiguration of walkways, shed driveway, landscaping, with a -3 determination.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, unanimous, none opposed.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay,
You
same
too.
to you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 397 Route 28, map 13, parcel D1. It is a waste site cleanup. It's a MCP site, and the intention is to reduce levels to no significant risk. The activities proposed include stripping of the upper strata of soils in certain areas, accumulating them in one area of the site, and covering them with 3 feet of clean soil to render the soils as potentially isolated under the MCP regulations, and restoring and revegetating disturbed areas. Does the project have a representative?
We do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
evening.
Dave Crispin here, BSC Group. I know Matt Crichton's here with BSC. I see Jeff Handler there. Is Jeff Lang with us tonight? Sandy Wyckoff is one of the owners as well.
I am here as Sandy.
Oh, okay. You're here as Sandy. Okay. Good disguise. Good disguise. So anyway, I've got about 12 or 13 slides I want to show you that will walk you through what we recently submitted. You had asked for 4 or 5 items, so we've taken and responded to each one of those.
David, I'm making you a presenter, okay?
Okay. Hit the
Just
share
like
button
last
here.
time. Yep, so you should be able to share your screen. I mean, I'm sharing mine. I was sharing mine, but it's just easier if you, since it's your
that means
PowerPoint.
I can do that. I just need to do it for a second. Hang on a second.
Yep, just letting you know.
We have the technology. I wasn't prepared for that.
Sorry about that. Just figured it might be easier for you to control it.
Come on, open up. It's not that big a file. What is it doing? Let's try this one.
There you go.
Somehow it opened up 2 slides. Okay, this is basically the same cover screen we had last time, so we don't need to dwell on that. You all know where this is. Again, this is the same summary slide that we had last time. It shows the area being stripped as the orangey color, the area of borrow in the yellow color, and it shows the 2 foundations that are going to remain at the end of the day in light tan color. This is kind of a new slide. As we listened to your comments regarding putting a landscape plan together or a planting plan for the embankment, we also went back to a quick site walk that Amy and Jeff and Matt had, and there was a discussion about maybe putting a footpath around this site at some point in the future. With that in mind, we took a look at the grading on this site, and we basically created a plateau in the final grading where that tan, I guess you could, can you see my mouse going across here?
Yep.
We're not building a path, we're just grading it for a path. And it's kind of steep coming down here, so we're gonna have like a little horseshoe type thing come around. At this point, we're just on the existing ground, so there's nothing really happening over here. But the point was that someday we'll have some kind of a walking trail around the whole thing. And the landscaping shown on this rendering is quite schematic. There is another more detailed plan of that. This again is more in summary than anything. We have the high tide line, which divides the limit of the salt marsh that's going to be remediated from the Phragmites, basically upland wetland, the wetland area that's above the high tide line from the salt marsh. So those are the areas we're dealing with to scrape that material off. And we talked a little bit about what we were going to do with the material that we scrape off down here in the lower left of this slide. And the idea was we would dig a much deeper hole where we're going to put our contaminated mass so that we have about 6 feet of cover over this. So that these Phragmites roots that are in here don't have a chance to grow up and sprout through here. I've used this technique on other projects for Frag, and it seems to be deep enough that it doesn't emerge out. And this is kind of a general picture of what the embankment might look like. And there's that, future walking path. Just as a comment, in doing this regrading, we've kind of changed the erosion potential to the better. instead of having a large 3-to-1 steep, we've got a 3-to-1, a flat spot, and a 3-to-1. So we've changed that erosion potential for the better in the construction that's going to happen there. This is the planting plan. Casey Lee Bastian, one of our landscape architects, put this together. And it's kind of based on the number of plants and the square footage here. There's 13,000 square feet of area. This comes out when you put all these plants and trees and shrubs and everything to about a plant every 70 square feet. That's a fairly dense planting issue. And granted, they are not giant trees or whatnot, but we're confident that that will emerge into something quite nice at the end of the day. So there's a planting plan. Someone had asked last time, can we just kind of show you where the sample points were? Well, there's 2 slides here, and without going into a lot of detail, the green dots here, green circles, were monitoring wells put in by someone else. The darker blue circles were the piezometers we initially put in to screen the site. And then we put in some official monitoring wells here. And all of these little stars are actual surface samples or deep samples. So there's a number of samples. We think we have the site pretty well characterized. From the wetlands perspective, not as fancy colored, but there are a number of sediment samples that were done out here. And these were done at a surface depth of 6 inches and then at a depth of about 3 feet, a lot of them. And there was another test that was done, which is a bioavailability of lead and zinc. And that was the basis of the risk assessment out here, was the bioavailability. So there was a whole separate test on that, just not a concentration. There was a request about the construction task schedule and how this thing would go. This information is in a little more detail actually on the plans, but phase 1 is erosion controls. We take the brush off the embankment and we remove the shed and the footings and the foundations and whatever site preparation work we've got to do. Phase 2, we form the area where the fill's going, cut the Phragmites and remove the cuttings, excavate the area to accept that sediment from the marsh, and that's that 6 foot of cover area I showed you in the cross section. Excavate the top 6 inches of the salt marsh and put that material in the deep hole, restore the salt marsh and replant with Spartina patents, and that all happens very early in the game. Then we start excavating the steep bank. We strip the topsoil off the entire surface area that'd be remediated, place it all in the consolidation area. We go out and we collect all our confirmatory soil samples to make sure we've removed enough so we don't have to remove any more, but that's the purpose of those confirmatory soil samples. We cover the filled area with the notification barrier, the geofabric. We go up by Route 28, we excavate the material and we put 3 feet over it. We do the final grading, form our temporary sediment basins as all this goes on. And just so the contractor's aware, he's going to have to monitor the weather forecasts and erosion controls and form whatever temporary traps he's got to do to make sure this is stable while it's during construction. In the last 3 phases, we put down our plantable soil, plant it with a salt-tolerant native grass mix, replant the new embankment with the plant shown on the planting plan. Now the site is stable. We come out, we put in the groundwater monitoring wells, record our activity and use limitation. If everything has gone according to plan, we close the site with a permanent solution. As part of phase 6 here, there is a monitoring plan for the salt marsh, which includes photo documentation of things going on, survivability percentages, any emergence of Phragmites, cutting it or treating it with the glyphosate. And the goal is to have a 90% coverage. If we don't meet that, we go with additional plantings. And I know that was quick, but that's the meat of what was submitted to you. So we're open for questions.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure. Thank you for taking the commissioner's comments and questions and responding so well. Couple of quick things that have come up. Just hold on one second. There was some concern from the commissioners, a couple of them, that, you know, especially if this is going to be done, you know, stripped and then done potentially in the fall where it tends to get wetter, you know, really making sure that the erosion control is sufficient to withstand that, because it's a very open site, it's very exposed, and it is going to be pretty steep. So I liked when you said, you know, you're going to have somebody making sure that the erosion control remains intact, and if things need to be tweaked in the field, that you can do that. I would say I would recommend to the commission that we have, you know, monitoring of that on a fairly consistent basis, and just you know, checking in with that. So I had to, when I was going back and doing my review of this, I said, well, reminding myself that this is a cleanup project that is also grading and stabilization. So taking that into account, I understand thinking ahead with the path. I would hesitate to say, you know, let's be married to that exact spot, because I think that the walking path is going to be a part of this whole comprehensive site plan that you're going to do for development of the property. But that being said, I don't see a reason why you shouldn't do the grading as you've proposed. As you said, it almost slows any erosion potentially down in that area, because you're going to shelf it a little bit. So I would just, because the project really is about cleanup and stabilization, I think the path, while keeping it in the back of your mind and on the plans, you may want it here. I think it is, I don't think we should definitively approve the path in this exact location right yet, not knowing what else is going on in the site. But I don't have an issue with you grading as you've proposed essentially for it. The plantings, I mean, one every 70 square feet. I don't know if you're trying to go for more of a meadow or a little shrubland perspective. It does seem a little sparse to me. We usually look for, you know, if you're going for shrub plantings, it's usually one shrub per every 6 feet on center or something like that. However, knowing that there is going to be more going on this site, and that this in the future, and we can maybe look again, you know, at the whole picture. I think that this planting with the grass mix and the shrubs and trees that you're proposing will stabilize the site and achieve the second part of this application, which is the stabilization of the site. I didn't read in depth all the data you gave me, but I did skim through a lot of it. It was, well, we asked for it, so it was.
I tried to save you.
No, but it was really good information. It's not every day that we see these types of cleanups. So it's definitely a learning experience for myself and the commissioners, and we really appreciated that. And it really went to show that you did, in my opinion, do your homework. And our bylaw doesn't have anything more stringent that I can see when it comes to kind of site cleanups like this. So my recommendation is you defer to the state guidelines that you're abiding by. I do have one comment from a commissioner who could not be here tonight, and that's Mark Coleman. And he just said, so Mark, is an excavating contractor. He does a lot of earthwork. So he just, I'm gonna read an email that he sent to me this afternoon, if you don't mind. Just a thought, although I'm not a believer in burying the waste on the site without a liner, I do feel strongly that it should be capped with impervious material and vegetated in a substantial planting mix, not paved over. Perhaps you can inject this as a thought. I was a little, maybe he's thinking down the line in terms of, whether you would pave over it or not, but I didn't see any, requests for doing that tonight. So on this plan, so.
Yeah, all I can tell you is my opinion on that method one risk assessment that we went through is that it does not warrant a impervious line or over it. That's the whole basis of the methodology. Let me put it to you this way differently. If this material was buried at 3 feet already, we could just put an activity use limitation on it right there and leave it there. So there would be no physical alteration. But so the result is the same.
Mm-hmm. Just wanted to relay that. I told him I would. So, Mr. Chair, I don't think I have any more questions. Let me look real quick at my. Nope, I have no further comments.
Amy, I can, if you want real quick, I can touch on a couple of things that you had brought up. Dave and I were talking about the walking path. It was something that came up during the site visit, and we started talking about grading and the concept of having the path go around it. And that's when it kind of came to fruition to us that, you know, one of the concerns of the commission is erosion. So if we actually add the path in and we have that break, at least we're kind of, you know, not necessarily married to the idea or the exact location or whatnot, which is why we're not proposing pavement or some kind of other thing with it. It's just kind of, this is where we're thinking. It gives us a shelf from an erosion standpoint, and it kind of gives us something if we are going to regrade that bank back, it gives us something to kind of work with. So it kind of helps some of the concerns that the commission was you know, thinking last time around. It also helps maybe from a betterment standpoint, you know, to be able to say, you know, hopefully the community will be able to walk through here and enjoy it as well. It's not, you know, we're not doing this for a house, you know what I mean, or something like that, where we're trying to shut people out, but we're planning for that future use. And then as far as the plantings are concerned, and obviously the next phase of this, when we do permitting, we'll figure out, you know, the exact location. We'll figure out what it's going to be, you know, as far as shells or a stone or paver or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. We'd have to propose that going in. So that's to come. For right now, we're just looking at seeding it basically for a stabilization. The plantings and the sparseness of the plantings our original goal going into this really is to stabilize that area more than anything. And the best way to do that is with grass seed. And the issue that we have with going crazy robust on plants is if we end up with Phragmites seeding and coming out of this thing, we're going to have to treat it as well and manage it. So if there are Phragmites seed or something, let's say that are buried that we end up uncovering, we do expect some of that frag to come back out. We may have to hand pull, we may have to treat, we may have to try and work through it all. But if the area has more of a meadow mix as far as grass is concerned, and we can even try to mechanically weed whack the stuff, you know, or whatever, it may help the survivability as far as moving forward is concerned. So that was kind of our thought process on, you know, originally just wanting the grass out there and then coming up with this kind of mix where we're kind of clustering, but we have a lot more grass seed out there to allow that movement around and the management of Phragmites, but also just as a quick stabilization measure, because the grass is going to grow in the fall really well. It should seed in and grow really well when we're, you know, once we're done, you know, grading this area up. And it'll have that root mat in order to hold this thing for the winter. That's what we're looking for. The shrubs, things like that, towards the fall, you know, they'll stabilize themselves, but they're not necessarily going to grow out roots and really stabilize that soil, which is why the grass seed is kind of preferred at this stage. And obviously we got to come back and we've got more stuff going on out there. So hopefully by that time we'll have the monitoring done. We'll have some Phragmites work, you know, kind of worked into it and have a better idea of some of those other things, placements of buildings and pavement and all that. So
that's what I figured. And I think I think what you're doing will stabilize the site the best. I just wanted to say, you know, in the future, there might be more discussions about some of these areas, but if your goal is for stabilization, I think this is a good bet.
All right, thank you both. We'll ask for questions now from the commissioners, and I'll start with Stan.
Okay, a couple of things. I think what I heard Dave say in the beginning was about this path was they weren't proposing that at this point, but there might be one in the future, and that's why you're taking into account the different grading that you're doing.
That's correct.
So that we're not acting, and so in my opinion, I agree with Amy. I mean, the original intent of this project was for the cleanup project, and even at the last meeting, we said we're not getting into any other issues. So that's the way I interpret that this path is a possibility, but we're not considering anything here tonight for that path per se.
That's correct. And just for the record, the path is labeled conceptual future path. That's all it is conceptual. Right, and that'll come about as part of any future project. That's where I'll really get put into any proposals down the road. My original concern at the last meeting was storing the material on site, but I think after our discussions, you know, we came up with the fact that this is really all being monitored by the state, and you're having to meet their standards. I feel much more comfortable about that. I guess the only question is, through your phases, the monitoring is, and I don't know what all the specific states, where the state is doing this, but it's all through all these phases, right? Somebody's actively overseeing this from the State Department? Yeah, the way it works is I'm a licensed site professional. Basically, that license is a deputization of the state. So I will be the person monitoring this from an LSP point of view. I suspect Matt will be monitoring it from a wetlands point of view, but I'll be dealing with the hazardous materials point of view. Once we're done with you folks, our next step is to file with the state what's called a remedial action measure plan, or RAM plan. That will outline everything that I need to do and why I'm doing it and whatnot for the state. And then you will get, the selectmen, the Board of Health will get a certified letter saying that this RAM plan is available. Probably can just send you a copy of it if you really want to see it. But you've got the meat of it right here as to how it works. So yes, we'll be monitoring this regularly. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Stan. John, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful proposal here and the 500-page site analysis. I can't claim to have read the whole thing, but I did go through it and look at some of the data. And one thing that struck me about the test points was that there are a few places where there are extremely high levels of lead and zinc. One place down in that southwest corner labeled ENV6, I think, amounts to almost 0.5% of the mass of whatever sample was taken was lead.
It's actually 0.05%.
Well, it says
50,000 milligrams per liter would be 0.5%. I think we were at 1,200 or 1,100. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's nowhere near 0.5%.
I beg to differ. 50,000 milligrams per kilogram. That's 50 grams per kilogram. That would be 5%. 5,000 is 0.5%. I mean, yeah, 5,000 is 0.5%. I don't know. There's no point in arguing over numbers. It's a lot anyway. I don't think you'll argue with that. So, and there are other just individual points where it's very high, but most of the samples were way lower than that. And I'm just, with a sparse sampling like that, where the sources seem to be point sources, like almost like there was a car battery somehow buried at that place where the lead was leaching out of it. I mean, I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but I guess, do you have a way of being confident that there aren't other point sources of very high lead contamination in there that would be leaching out and affecting the marsh?
Interestingly, point source has a very specific definition. It's like a tank or something. There are no real point sources on the site. And I will tell you, we dug, as I showed you, a whole bunch of test holes out there. We did not see one car battery in the whole site, which leads me to believe that this lead is really from gasoline that leaked out of gas tanks when they were junked there. And the gasoline's evaporated and bioremediated itself, and the lead is what's left.
Okay.
And we weren't looking for batteries. I mean, we looked for batteries. We couldn't find any.
I see. Okay. All right. But you have some idea of what the sort of background level of lead and zinc are in the marsh as a whole, as opposed to in those particular places where you sampled very high levels?
Yeah, if you read through the method 3 risk assessment the GHR did for us, the spot that's shaded in dark green over here in the lower left was the area where we had those hot spots. Out of the other 20 some odd samples out there, none of them were in that range. So does it mean there couldn't be something else out there? It doesn't guarantee it, but it's you never have enough data. An LSP would love to have a data point every 2 feet. You can't do it.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one other question, which is what happens when you bury a bunch of Phragmites? And it's the root mass, I assume, is what you're actually burying there. So there's a fair amount of biomass under there, which presumably will be decaying. I'm just wondering whether you have any concerns about that decaying and causing surface subsidence as a result.
It's a fair question, and we're going to have to look at the final, what we put out there. If it's just out in the lawn and it settles a foot or so, I don't think it would be the end of the world. If it's a parking lot, we're certainly not going to put a building over it. Whatever happens within this activity and use limitation, which is the light tan doorstop shaped piece there, there won't be any buildings over it, I can tell you that. So the differential settlement is certainly some possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, Ernie, you're up.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So you've outlined a number of different phases on your remediation plan. Can you provide us with dates or some time span for these different phases?
I haven't talked to whoever the selected contractor is going to be yet, and that's going to be a little bit in his ball game. If I was to guess, this whole thing will be less than 3 months long.
Okay, because I obviously Amy, I think, is going to want to monitor the activity that's going on in this site, and it'll be helpful for her to know when each of these different steps is going to take place. So I would ask that you provide her with some better estimate of when these activities will be occurring. Under phase 5, number 20, you mentioned that you're going to provide the MCP with a permanent solution. What does that suggest to us?
It means the site gets closed out under the 21E Massachusetts contingency plan. They used to call it a response action outcome statement, which was the final step. They changed it to permanent solution about 4 or 5 years ago. So that's why it's in quote. It's a defined action.
Okay. So
it basically means they're out of the 21E system. That's what it means. No more paperwork, no more submissions, no more.
All the work is done.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then the last comment I have, you mentioned in the summary that it's expected that the subsequent development will include an extensive Phragmites control plan. I would suggest that we condition whatever approval we provide to this, that's not expected, but that's a must. So, I would want to see going forward that Phragmites are controlled and sort of eradicated from that site to the extent that it can be. And that's the only other comment I have.
right, thank you, Ernie. Jim, any comments from you?
Yep, I'm here. So I had a question on how the temporary sediment basin will be managed. And is there a reason why it wouldn't really just be a permanent depression there that would store drainage water? It could be possibly planted with some plants that would like that. Any response to that?
I'd be happy to respond to that. We've broken this into two phases, which is certainly the remediation phase and then the development phase. The concepts that we've got has exactly what you're talking about, is another retention facility right there. The grading will probably change a little bit as it gets finalized, but it's in the same location. And that's because this entire site's going to run down and it's going to drain right here. This site drains down right here. It all goes right here. So that's why it's there. And that will certainly get re-landscaped and regraded and finalized. And, you know, maybe this footpath isn't here. Maybe it's over here at that point. I don't know how that's going to come out, but it's a phase 2 question.
Okay, yeah, it would make sense to me for that to be kind of a natural water storage area, being, you know, close to the wetland and whatnot. So my other question is regarding how the area further to the west will be managed within the 50-foot buffer to the wetland, where you have your planting plan and whatnot. Is that essentially going to be left to naturalize other than invasive management, or is there another management plan?
Matt, you want to comment on that? In my book, it was going to naturalize from once we get this thing stabilized. We have no reason to go back down there.
Yeah, the idea, and that was kind of part of the idea of grading in a path or something along that area was, you know, so we're not going back down and trying to change things down the road. The thought process is essentially just leave it as is, because like you said, we're probably going to have to get in there and manage Phragmites and whatnot. And once that stuff is managed a little bit better, then, you know, it would just end up growing in naturally over time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'd be supportive of a condition that states that within the planting area anyway, that the area within the 50-foot buffer to the wetland should be left to naturalize other than invasive management. That's my only comments.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, I've got a couple myself. One is to follow up on Amy's concern about surface flow during, you know, rain activity. And so one thing I was hoping to see was a contingency plan as to what would happen during phase 2 when the excavation was occurring if you had rain events. And so what do you think of the concept of including some language there that would suggest ways to better protect surface flow? You know, say if you're right in the height of your excavation and you have a 2.5-inch rain event, would it be reasonable to put some language in there that speaks to that?
We have no objection to that, and what I tried to hint at in that section was that if they see a rainstorm coming, they dig a series of, you know, I'll call them puddles for lack of a better term, but as the flow comes down, someplace to trap that sediment and run off before it gets down there. That can be done, I'm guessing, with a piece of equipment, you know, in a few hours time to prepare for something bad that's coming.
Right. So who would make that call? Is that going to be signed to the specific monitor on the site? It seems to me we'd like to see some language that says, okay, here's what you do with a particular event. Here's the response. Somebody calls Amy, and then here's the activity that occurs. Should we identify an individual? how would that go?
It may be the contractor, it may be BSC. We don't know at this point. Sometimes we do that for the client, sometimes the contractor, if he's qualified to do it. This site will warrant itself to an NPDES stormwater permit. We haven't filed for that yet, but in doing that, we need to create a stormwater management plan specifically for the construction that's going to happen here. We'd be happy to share that with you when it gets filed. And that will include the schedules and how that all works.
Okay, so that's all coming up. All right, well, for this order, if you could just insert maybe an item under phase 2, the outline of remedial actions, that there will be, a process that would include some, site excavation to allow stormwater to go to certain places. Just some language to give us some comfort. It sounds like you're required to do all this anyways, but I think it would be helpful. That came up last hearing as a primary concern, I think, the surface runoff.
Yeah, well, this is a little more detail on the plan, but this section down here, it says form temporary sediment traps across the site during the process of the work. That's what I was trying to describe.
Do you have any thresholds for rain events that would lead you to do something specifically?
I think if I saw, severe thunderstorms forecast or something, I'd look at it carefully, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on that just a little bit, maybe to,
Sure.
I don't know how much you know about NIPDs. It's a federal program, not a local or a state program, so it might not be something that you're as familiar with. So the EPA gets involved in any site clearing that's over an acre in size. And so we have existing site disturbance during construction that'll be over an acre. And so the town probably engineer, I think, Dave, is the one that said, hey, you're going to have to file with NIPDs. Essentially,
we knew that.
Yeah.
But what the town guidelines say is you have to do that anyway. So we knew we had to do it.
Yeah. And so the EPA filing is a notice of intent, which is pretty basic. It's nothing like this. But along with the notice of intent is an action plan on how you manage every drop of water that hits your site, how you manage dust on your site, how you manage snow, rain. It doesn't matter. There are triggered events where you have to have an inspector out within a certain period of time. So you either have to monitor the site weekly, or you have to monitor the site biweekly, and after a half inch or more of rain, you have to have somebody out there within a certain period of time to make sure the erosion controls look good, make sure that there are no major issues, fix anything that needs to be fixed, pull back any sediment that needs to be pulled back, that kind of stuff. All of that is outlined in what's called the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. It has a list of BMPs, best management practices, and all that is part of the federal program. So I don't know if that helps you, but there's a whole list of guidelines that the feds basically say you need to have somebody out there within 24 hours because we had a half inch more of rain and you're monitoring biweekly instead of weekly, or if you monitor weekly, then you would pick that up on your weekly inspection. Sometimes contractors do that because they have to have somebody that understands stormwater and is qualified under the EPA guidelines to monitor for stormwater. A lot of times they do that on purpose, so that they don't have to hire outside consultants to necessarily do all of that work. It is required by the owner and the contractor. Both are responsible to manage stormwater on the site. It's believed that the owner can go and stop work at any time in order to manage stormwater, and tell the contractor what to do because they own the site or their engineering firm. So there is a lot of guidelines there that are way outside of Wetland Protection Act and what you guys would normally be used to looking at, but on a bigger site like this, there's stuff that we have to conform to, and the building department is the one usually that is going to say you have to do this, which they've already said, and they'll probably end up being out there, or the Board of Health, or somebody doing a drive-by and check-in. I'm sure obviously Amy as well, but there are guidelines for that.
Oh, good. Okay. Well then. Yeah, I think there'd be no objections then if we had a condition in your order that asks you to provide that document to the Conservation Commission and Conservation Department, and to inform Amy when certain thresholds are hit, just to keep us in touch. Would that be reasonable?
No objection.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And just to be clear, if you don't expect you're going to see drainage calculations and that sort of stuff in that kind of report, it's more about erosion control. And I'll ask the question so you understand this maybe. What year is a silt fence? What return period storm is a silt fence designed for? Is it for 1 year storm, 10-year storm, 100-year storm? There's no real design standard to that. You do the best you can. So that's the type of information is there. Keep the erosion out of the marsh.
Right, and it is a significant concern for us because you've got about a 15-foot drop in the 0 to 50 in elevation, so it is a concern for us, and so that's why I've been asking for some documentation of what would happen. I think it is, it was probably the foremost concern identified at the last hearing. Okay, I have one more comment following up on Ernie's point about the frag control. Is this permitting going to allow the treatment of frag if it emerges, or would that be something that comes back to us once if the problem is identified?
For what we have proposed, we're asking to be able to treat the Phragmites that emerges, because if it's 6 or 8 months down the road or next year when we come in and this whole thing is fully designed, let's say, we don't want the Phragmites to come back and start creeping in these areas, especially in the salt marsh area, which is a hot button issue for DMF to make sure that you have monitors out there monitoring that. If we can hand pull it, we will. If we have to treat it, then we'd like to have basically any option as far as mowing, treating, and hand pulling available to us at this time, because this area is there is quite a bit of frag, and we're going to spend quite a bit of money to try to plant and stabilize it. We don't want it to stabilize with frag in the meantime.
Yep. And Amy, are you comfortable with the monitoring plan allowing that process to keep you informed?
Yes, and I think that they will.
Okay, good. Okay. Any comments from the audience? Okay, hearing none, I'll circle back. Any additional comments from the commissioners or anybody else? Okay, well then I think if somebody would like to make a motion on the notice of intent.
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 397 Route 28.
With the adjustments that we've discussed tonight, John?
With the adjustments we've discussed tonight, yes.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's 5 in favor. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much.
Take care, everybody.
Amy, you taking my screen away? How do I get out of this?
I think you have to get it back to me. I tried doing this.
If I just X out of here, will it give it back to you?
Here's that. Yep, that will do.
Leave meeting. Goodbye. Thank you. See you in the future shortly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 2261 Head of the Bay Road, map 119, parcel N5. It's a proposal to renovate an existing dwelling, reconstruction of the deck, and installation of a generator. Do we have a representative here? I guess David Little.
Good evening. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everybody. David Little representing Kathryn Green. I provided you with the proposed site plan, which included the mitigation planting plan, and I also provided you with detailed coverage calculations so you could see specifically what's happening within the various buffer zones. So I believe Amy's very familiar with this property, and I imagine some of the commissioners are as well that have been on the commission for a while. The structures on the site include a dwelling and a small cottage constructed in 1982. And the resource areas on and off the site include land subject to coastal storm flowage, a velocity zone, VE elevation 18, and also an A zone, which signifies still water flooding, which is AE elevation 13, a coastal bank, a vegetated wetland to the northwest, which has been noted could be at the potential vernal pool for another project that we worked on the north side of this property, and also the Pleasant Bay ACEC. So we've shown all the associated buffer zones on our site plan and on the existing conditions plan. The proposed work includes the renovation of the dwelling, reconstruction of the deck, and the installation of a generator on the rear of the garage. All work is occurring within the footprint of the existing dwelling, patio, and deck, with the exception of the proposed generator. That is going to be new footprint directly to the rear of the garage. We have worked with the designer on this to make a concerted effort to comply with the coverage requirements of the commission. So the project results in a decrease in coverage in the 0 to 50 foot buffer of 138 square feet. And if you are interested, a decrease in the 0 to 60 foot buffer of 140 square feet. I know that the commission has brought up the 60 foot setback in the past. There is an increase of coverage of 58 square feet in the 50 to 100 foot buffer. And then we also have a reduction in coverage in the ACEC boundary of 83 square feet. And additionally, the closest part of the deck to the top of the coastal bank, we have retreated 3 square feet to try and minimize the impacts there. So with respect to the coastal bank, we believe the project won't have any impact on the ability of the bank to act as a sediment source or act as a vertical buffer to stormwaters. The proposed work will not have any impact on potential floodwaters that could reach this site. It's well above them. And with respect to the wetland off Locust to the northwest, the majority of the proposed work is located on the opposite side of the house from that wetland, and with the exception of where we're proposing the generator. On the site plan, we've noted an area of proposed mitigation, which is adjacent to a naturalized area southeast of the dwelling, which constitutes approximately 170 square feet. So where we do have an increase in coverage of 58 square feet in the 50 to 100 foot buffer, we are providing almost 3 to 1 mitigation for the proposed work. I think I'll end my presentation there and entertain any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us on this one?
I'll be very quick. I don't think the project as proposed is going to have any negative impact to the resource areas. There's benefit here. It doesn't appear that they're using chemical application on the property anyways, but we could put that in, of course, we'll put that in the orders of conditions, our standard language for that. But I would recommend approval of the project as presented.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, questions from the commissioners, starting with Stan?
No comments from me.
Thank you. John?
No questions or comments.
Okay. Ernie?
Yeah, David, I'm looking at your numbers, and I'm struggling with the numbers, with the conclusions that you've made on them. So in your coverage calculations, you show that the existing is 3,070. I'm looking on the plan that shows the dwelling on it. And your proposed is 3,326, which suggests there's a 256 square foot increase in coverage, all of which I think is in the 50. But when I look down to your site coverage, it shows a reduction from the existing to the proposed of 116 square feet. I'm struggling with how to come up with that.
I looked at I remember looking at that before, Ernie, and figuring it out, but it escapes me now. If you can bear with me for just 1 second, please.
All right.
So the coverage calculations on our plan specifically refer to building coverage. They don't refer to patios, decks, and walkways. So in our plan, we've actually reduced the size of the deck. If you'll notice, the deck gets reduced from 507 to 496.
Yeah, I see that.
The overall difference, Ernie, is that my coverage calculations include everything, including walls, walks, patios, drives, and I can review this and follow up with a correct, if I find a mistake, I can follow up with Amy to provide more accurate numbers, but I was very careful to make sure of the decrease in the 0 to 50 foot buffer, knowing historically how you want, the commission wants to see that. But I can't answer that right now, to be honest, Ernie.
Okay, because I went back to page 2 that you provided to us that showed the different areas, the 0 to 50 and the 50 to 100 and the ACC. And all of those I can foot. I mean, they all make sense. And Stan, you're the numbers guy, but you know, when I looked at the other plan here, it just didn't make sense. You know, the numbers didn't really comport with the site coverage versus the change in the coverage calculations. And I'm guessing that our coverage calculations on the site plan are incorrect, but I'm going to need time to rectify that, and I can certainly follow up with Amy with a corrected plan. But I really tried to be very, very careful with the coverage calculation sketch. That's why I go into this in detail so you can see that. And I even sent Amy an additional one that noted the coverage in the 0 to 60 being a reduction as well. But my guess, Ernie, is it's the coverage calculations in the site plan are incorrect. I guess that's really what Okay. Which would impact the mitigation numbers that we have too, I assume.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll need to get those resolved. The only other question I had, David, was the generator. Is that going to be natural gas or propane?
It's going to be propane.
So where's?
Oh no, I'm sorry. The site is served by natural gas. I did see. No, it will be natural gas. I did see the gas meter when I was out on one of my site visits.
Okay, so it will not be propane then. We won't have any impact for having to install propane tanks or anything like that, right?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ernie. Jim, you're up.
Yeah, other than in regards to Ernie's comments, like the general plan looks good, but if it's found that the coverage is different than the mitigation, they need to be adjusted. That's my only comment.
Agreed, Jim.
And I'll just follow up on both those comments with, I guess, a question that may not have significance. Maybe it's just for my education, but the plantings seem to be a little on the ornamental side. And I'm just wondering if everybody's comfortable with those particular species. A lot of times, if we're in the 50-foot buffer zone, we like to see more native shrubs that would be there anyways. So I don't know if David or Amy want to comment on the possibility of if those species are suitable, and could there be any substitutes?
The rose was included, Brad, because there's already multiflora rose on the site, and we consulted with the client, but we're certainly amenable to making any changes if the commission so feels it's necessary.
Okay. What do you think about this, Amy?
I would say as long as it isn't maintained as like a formal planting bed, I would be okay with it. There are some wildflowers here. They are native, and it would provide. There's a lot of shrubs, and the site is well treed. I don't have an issue with it as long as it doesn't become a formalized planting bed, and I think it could actually benefit pollinators and things like that. So it's a pretty small area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly have an issue as long as it doesn't become a formalized, manicured planting bed. As long as it's allowed to naturalize, I'm okay with it.
Right, and that is a concern. We've seen that happen a few places where there's all good intentions, but then it does become something that's quite, cosmetic that way. Well, I guess if the adjustment of the site calculations results in the need to have any more plantings, I would ask to have the leading buffer have, native shrubs or bushes that would be there and would really provide more diverse wildlife habitat if that's suitable.
I'm definitely on board with that, Brad.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Let's see. Any comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, I think that we can probably move right to a motion. We didn't have
Hang
a
on
lot
one
of.
second, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I just got an email from the applicant. It says generator is to be propane.
Okay.
That was from Kathy Green.
Mm-hmm.
Just to let you know.
So we're going to have to figure out a spot for a propane tank.
Yep.
She said it's going to be, excuse me, Amy, she said it's going to be natural or propane.
She says generator to be propane.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Ernie, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's going to be propane, then there's going to be tanks somewhere on the property. Depends on the size of the tank that they plan to put in. If there are buried tanks, then we'll need to know where those are going to be located. I think with that and the coverage calculation issues that Dave is going to get back to us with, that we should postpone a motion on this.
I'm comfortable continuing this. I'd like to give everybody a comfort level with the numbers on my coverage calcs, and I can talk to Kathryn Green about the location for the propane tank. There is no rush. The project is not planned to start until the fall, so we certainly have the opportunity to continue it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think you're hearing that there's generally a good sense of this project. There's a couple loose ends you got to tie up.
Okay. Well, then, hearing that, I'd like to move that we continue the project for 2261 Head of the Bay Road until July 15th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, second that by Stan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, the next two items on the agenda are going to be continued, so I'll open hearings and then we'll have motion to continue them to the next hearing. The first is 7 Sketchaconet Way, map 4, parcel C1-4, proposal for a pier, ramp, and float on the Herring River. I move that we continue the hearing until July 15th, 2020.
Second that.
Okay, seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Next, we have a notice of intent for 14 Mill Point Road, map 1, parcel J1-94, proposal for a pier, ramp, and float on the Herring River. And I motion that we continue the hearing until July 15th, 2020. Have a second, please?
Second. I'll second.
All right, seconded by Ernie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Next, we have a change in plan for 55 Snowland Road, map 15, parcel N5, It's a change in the dock configuration. Do we have a representative here tonight?
Yep, Skipper Lee right here.
How you doing, Skipper?
I'm good, Brad. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. All right, it's pretty simple, but if you want to run through it quickly, Skipper, that'd be helpful.
Okay, I'd like to change the configuration of the dock. It's a T right now, and change it to a rectangle 8.5 feet wide by 20 feet long. It would reduce the overall square footage of it by 6 feet, and it would just provide better usage. It goes hand in hand with the lengthening of the ramp because it's extremely steep at low water right now. So I'd like to lengthen the ramp to 20 feet, 16 to 20. There'd be no further egress on the waterway with the float. There'd be no asking for it to go out. We've done the bulk of the dredging, and there'd be 3 feet under the proposed float through the whole thing. So it'll be the lengthening of the ramp, the change of the configuration of the float, and then we've dredged up alongside of the dock. And in looking at it and the way that it's backfilling in and whatnot, and where the dredge line was, it went underneath the dock a little ways. So I put in a little return and one sheet going to the south, just because I wouldn't be able to get them in later, after the build. But they can come out very easily. They're only part way in, hoping that this will go through. And the reason for it is just the backfilling and the wash and the action of the tides, filling around that south side. And so I'd like a 5-foot return on each side. I think the one on the north is only 4 feet now, but so 4 feet, 5 feet. It depends on how the sheets lay out. They're 20-inch sheets. So that's why also the increase of the length of the wall from 17 to 18. Because at 17, I was just going to cut a sheet in half, but then I don't have the interlocking capacity of the sheets. So it's just to put the full sheet in would run it to around 18 feet. So 18 feet on the inside with 2 5-foot returns to help with maintenance dredging. That would be hopefully pretty non-existent after a period of time with that configuration also. So that's it. Those 3 or 4 changes, whatever you want to look at them as.
Yep, thanks, Skipper. So you have not installed the bulkhead yet?
I have not.
Okay. All right. Amy, do you have any summary comments for us?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty straightforward request for a change. It was just something I didn't feel like I could do administratively for him because it was, subject to a larger hearing and a lot of discussion. So I went out to the site with Skip, and John Rendon, the harbor master, came as well. He has no issue with the change. And I think it will, potentially the bulkhead could stabilize a little bit of the marsh behind it anyways and cause for more marsh growth. But I think prevention of additional slumping to an area that you've already gotten approved to be dredged is a good thing, and it would hopefully cause you to not have to dredge so much in the future and alter the site that way. So I would recommend approval of the change in plan.
Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, I'll start on questions from the commissioners. I'll start with you, Jim.
Yeah, I'm okay with this. I have no comments.
Okay. Ernie?
Yeah, there we got it. Yeah, Skipper, I was pleased to see that the marsh is growing very well underneath the dock or the walkway that's currently going out there. Question for you, is there any benefit to extending the bulkhead to the north side of the walkway, underneath the walkway?
I don't think so with the return going in there. It would be difficult to do at this point also. I mean, I could put some short sheets in there, but I wouldn't see where it's not dredged on that north side. where there would be any gain from doing that.
Okay. All right. No, I'm fine with this. Otherwise, it looks good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, Stan?
No comment, except like Ernie said, with that new dock, the new dock up there being higher off the ground, that marsh grass is really looking a lot better than it was a year or so ago when the old dock was there.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing now for sure. It's quite high compared to that dock, which was underwater at high tide.
I know. That's all.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Skipper, when do you plan to do your construction and the dredging?
I'll wait until fall now. You know, wait for the season to go by and then start up again sometime in the fall.
Okay.
And I should have everything done by the first of the year.
Yep. Okay, any comments from the audience? All right, hearing none. Any additional comments from attendees? Otherwise? Okay, would someone like to make a motion on the change in plans?
Sure, I'll make it. I'll make a motion to approve the change in plan for the change in dock configuration and the minor adjustments for the bulkhead.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Ernie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, 5 votes in favor. All right, thank you, Skipper.
Does that include the lengthening of the ramp? I didn't hear that in the motion.
Yes, that was part of the proposed changes, so I think it's all inclusive.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, next we have a extension request, 56 Permakeen Lane, map 24, parcel H17. It's a proposal for a new dwelling. They cannot be in attendance tonight, so I guess we're going to continue until the 15th, Amy?
Yeah, and I actually did speak with a representative after, at the end of the day today, and they did ask that we hold off on, I originally thought we could make some, ask some questions of them, but they requested that since they can't be part of this tonight, that you hold off on making any questions or comments. And if you do have any questions or comments related to what they submitted to you, that you just send them over to me and I'm happy to relay them to them. They just couldn't attend tonight.
Okay, that makes it simple. Okay, well then I move that we continue the extension request for 56 Permakeen Lane until July 15th, 2020.
A second.
Okay, seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
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 Hey, I couldn't hear. Everything froze up on me, so I didn't know what was going on there, Amy.
They just requested, Stan, that we not have discussion tonight, that if you have any questions based on what they sent you, just send it to me and I'll happily send it to them, but they'll be on for the 15th.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, next we have a request for amended order of conditions for 6 and 10 Neal Road, map 9, parcels A7-1 and 2. And I think we have Don Monroe here to represent the project.
Yes, thank you, Brad, through the chair. We presented this plan a while back, well before it would have been allowed to do an eelgrass and shellfish survey. So we waited until late June and scheduled the shellfish and eelgrass survey to be done at the same time. Charlie from my office is a licensed diver and captain, and he ran the project pretty much, and we used Pam Nuber to do the shellfish survey. So we submitted all the information, including Pam Nuber's report. She's on the line and would be able to answer any questions. But the project basically hasn't changed. We are applying to put sediment or nourishment below mean high water. We would like to reconstruct the 2 middle groins in the same footprint, but to the original specifications, which are on the first plans that were submitted to you back in sometime in January, February. So that hasn't changed. We did change the plan in that we just made a note on the plan that says there was no eelgrass found within 300 feet of mean high water. And we gave Pam Nuber plans, base plans, in order to show where her transects were taken. And so that's basically what we're looking for, is for the commission to look at this project again. It's been a while, I know, although, like I said, the proposal hasn't really changed much. All we needed to do was go back and do the eelgrass and the shellfish survey. We did get an email, I think Amy got it as well, from Amy Hennig, that Natural Heritage's original letter for this project is still intact. They didn't have any more comments because the project hadn't changed. All we did was provide them more information. So, and DMF, the same, as long as there's conditions put on the project, they didn't have any issues the first time around. So that's why we're asking for an amendment to the original. And then we got you that additional information.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have summary comments for us?
Can Pam just quickly go over the shellfish and eelgrass survey? It can be very brief. There's not much to talk about. Can't hear you, Pam.
I'm muted. It just popped up and told me I was muted. Yeah, so we did a shellfish survey. We set our transects every 10 feet, going from mean high water to mean low water, and then out to the beyond the toe of the proposed dredge material placement. And then we set because it was such a large area, we set our transects every 50 feet apart. So during the survey, we assessed both areas we assessed the areas for sediment type as well as for shellfish habitat, and Charlie and Dawn's group did the diving work to look for the eelgrass habitat. We didn't find any shellfish. We didn't find any eelgrass, which is consistent. The eelgrass, there's no eelgrass that's been mapped there by Mass DEP, and it's a very highly dynamic area. There's a lot of wave action, sand ripples, and indicate that the area is very dynamic. So it's not surprising that some beach renourishment is requested. You could see along the coastal bank, some of the coastal bank was eroding away, but that's not my expertise. I'll leave that to Dawn to talk about, but we didn't find any shellfish or eelgrass.
Okay, and because of the wave activity, that's why you would, and the dynamic nature of that's why you think you found the no shellfish.
The habitat. I mean, a lot of the area where it's up in the high tide. It's up in the high tide zone too, as well. So the sand is dry and it's not ideal shellfish habitat. It's not mapped by the town as shellfish habitat. It's not mapped by the state as, in fact, the state draws if you look closely, you can see that the state draws a little line and maps the area where just outside of there's the groins or the revetments, the state maps the shellfish habitat as outside of the area where those groins are. They don't map the intertidal zone as shellfish habitat.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not gonna kind of go back and discuss any of that. Let's see, going through my summary here. So back with the original filing, this application was looked at by the Waterways Committee, Harbor Master, and Natural Resources Director. They didn't have any issue with the proposed nourishment below mean high water or the groin repair. Again, we already approved nourishment above mean high water and fencing. This has been done. I put the original letters from Heritage and Division of Marine Fisheries in your Dropbox for you. And basically they said, Heritage said it needed to be conditioned for them to take. They were mostly talking about plovers. So for the above the mean high water, which that's been addressed, DMF offered some conditions. The eelgrass survey, they noted to do it in July. This one was done in June. That's pretty close. I think the commission at their last meeting had said that June would be sufficient to do the eelgrass survey. So that's what they did at the beginning of June. They provided a copy of this to DMF and NHESP, and you said, they have no further comments on that. Because I think what you've shown is that based on your survey that if there is shellfish there, there's not many. You didn't find any, but they don't necessarily maybe want to be there. I think that in this particular instance, we don't normally, it's not every instance that we would grant intertidal nourishment or below mean high water nourishment. But I think in this particular instance, where you show that you don't have a significant population of species that we're looking for, that this would actually, create more of a gradual intertidal zone, reduce wave action that's currently causing erosion to the dune. Coastal dune is a highly protected resource area, and I think that this could not only be something, obviously, that the applicant wants, but also something that could provide some benefit to the coastal beach area and the coastal dunes. So, with a bunch of conditions, a lot of them from DMF and Heritage, I could recommend approval of this. So I will leave that. That'll be the end of my comments for now.
All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, I'll start with comments from commissioners, starting with Jim.
All right, well, yeah, I do have some reservations about the below high water line nourishment. I don't know exactly why. It just seems to be kind of going too far with that type of thing. But that's my only comment. I'll wait to hear from the other commissioners.
Okay. Ernie.
Yeah, Amy, you say with a lot of conditions you'd recommend approval. Do we have to include those conditions in our motion tonight?
There would be a lot of, not necessarily because I haven't worked them all out yet. A lot of it would deal with monitoring and things like that, and sediment quality that you have to use. I would just recommend you don't close the hearing tonight, and that normally we would vote on a project and do the order of conditions next time, and the applicants aren't always present at that. But because there's so many conditions, there may be a lot of conditions there. I would recommend that the next meeting where we formally issue the permit, that they would be allowed to be present too, and I'm happy to give them a draft of that permit. I don't have everything. I would hope to have them more worked out for you. I also didn't know how the commission was going to go. But
so should we defer approving this then until we have these conditions outlined? It sounds to me like we should. Let me preface that. It sounds to me like we should.
I wasn't sure how the commission would feel about the project, so I didn't go ahead and start drafting them. I am comfortable with, I think we can appropriately condition this for approval, so I don't have any qualms in you voting tonight with as we normally do with the order of conditions coming after.
All right, thank you.
So if you think this project can be conditioned, I think you should vote tonight for approval.
All right, and none of the conditions would suggest any feedback from the applicants or from others or anything else, right?
No, but I'm happy to provide them with the draft conditions ahead of time to make sure everything's amenable to them. I don't think anything's going to change the scope of the project.
All right. All right, so John, are you?
Yeah, we're comfortable with that. We've done that. Other commissions, especially in Harwich, have done that in the past where Amy will draft up an order of conditions. We take a look at it. Typically, it doesn't change the project. It just conditions it such that we have to follow the guidelines of the permit. And I don't think we'll have any issue with that at all.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Ernie?
Yeah, I have no other comments. Thank you.
Okay. John, any comments?
Yeah, I don't really have any comments or questions. I guess well, I do have a comment, I guess. I don't see a downside here. So seems like there's a net benefit in protecting the dune. And seeing what else has gone on from Stage Harbor Channel west along these beaches. There's a lot of beach nourishment that's been going on, and I guess there was a concern earlier about shellfish and impact on shellfish, but it seems like that's not really an issue at this location. So I don't see a downside here.
Okay, thank you, Stan.
I have one question. I'm trying to remember any sand flowing in the sound. Is that going east or west?
East.
Okay. And I guess my comment is with all of these projects, not just this one, but I have a problem with all of these projects. I think I've said this before in some of the meetings. We're fighting Mother Nature here. I've been coming to the Cape for a long time. I'm a wash ashore, but I've been coming here since the early 70s, and I've seen the changes. I mean, you go out by the lighthouse in Chatham, you see the changes weekly. I was at Stage Harbor kayaking this weekend at low tide. It's almost all sand there. And even though this is just one little project, they all add up. And if it's flowing there, how do we know how much is now impacting other areas of the Cape, causing problems there?
I guess I would just say that the groins, once they get reconstructed, the idea is that the sand is, I mean, it's not permanent, but it's going to stay in that location a little bit longer than it would.
I don't have a problem with the groin, but I mean, any nourishment of any kind, I'm saying, not just this project, but all of them. And so I really think we're fighting a losing battle, and in general, I'm against doing any of these, but that's all my comment is.
All right, thank you, Stan. All right, I've got a series of comments, so I guess it's my turn. And I do really appreciate the project doing all the work they did. It was really a tremendous amount of work with the shellfish survey and the eelgrass survey. And I think that, folks may agree that if they found those resources, this would be a non-starter to consider nourishment below the mean high water mark. And but I still oppose the practice. I've just spent a lot of time looking at these sites, and what I think happens is you have really a large amount of sediments that are deposited intertidally, subtidally, and it will bury whatever's there, and it will degrade that habitat. And to me, it's a fairly fleeting benefit for a single private property while degrading a public resource. So I, have not been in favor of intertidal nourishment, with the one exception of the Pleasant Bay site where you had a really homogeneous substrate. It was just all, medium fine sands. And so it really didn't matter. But I was out there today. I've been to this site a few times. I did some digging. I found no quahogs. There's a fair amount of quahog shells that are there. I think the problem with this site is water quality. Eelgrass used to be in the vicinity. Quahogs used to be in the vicinity. You just have such poor water quality at this area of Nantucket Sound presently. You just don't have very good light penetration at all when you have a southwest wind. It's a vegetable soup under those conditions. So I think those are the reasons why those resources are not there. But what I did find, I found 7 or 8 blue mussels today, juvenile blue mussels, at least 2 species of green macrophytes, and hundreds of mole crabs right on that crest at low tide. So, you know, if I'm finding those creatures like that, then there's other creatures there that I'm not sampling for, I'm not seeing. So to me, this type of nourishment will do unnecessary impact to those habitats for really, you know, a benefit that doesn't really extend very far. I think the sand will not stay there for that many years. And so I share Stan's concern that we're chasing something that's really not attainable. And so, you know, again, I appreciate what was done. I don't think that my feeling has changed too much on this practice at this location since the last hearing. Any comments from the audience? Okay, hearing none. Any additional thoughts from the commissioners? Any further thoughts on things that I brought up?
I'd like to say something. I just wanted to comment though, because before we go ahead with anything on this, there is 2 parts to this really. There's the groins and there's nourishment in terms of this request. So we got to be careful what we're voting on there, I think.
Well, the groins we already approved, right?
No, through the chair, no, they were withdrawn.
Okay.
So we could do the fence and the nourishment above. It is presented as one project. So I appreciate the commissioners not separating groins from nourishment below, because we need the groins to augment the nourishment below. And we do have, you know, evidence from an expert, also your own shellfish constable, indicating that there's not an issue with shellfish, although Brad brings up, you know, some mussels and some other indigenous critters out there. Although I think those particular types of critters are not going to suffer under the thin veneer of material that we're talking about. I realize that probably commissioners will disagree with that, but I do have to go on record saying that based on the experts that we've hired, based on the study that we've done, based on the eelgrass not being there, and based on Brad's own observation that the water quality is low, that the additional amount of sand that we're talking about because of the water quality, since we're already stuck with that bad water quality, I believe that we should be able to get this approved just based on those statements that were already made by some of the commissioners. And I do realize Stan makes a good point. Yeah, we suffer, a lot of people suffer along this coastline not being able to put up structures to protect pre-78 homes, mainly because there's a dune formation. So if we don't have some method or means to at least try to enhance the dune as well as enhance the beach profile, which is typically done from New Jersey all the way south to Florida, that this is one method that is used. And unfortunately, it's not looked at as a favorable method in Massachusetts, only because it's not practiced that much. But if you go to the town next door in Chatham, they do a lot of this, and they do preserve their beaches and preserve their dunes through this method. So, you know, it'd be nice if Harwich would jump on board, because I think no matter what sand we place in this location, it does travel from east to west. So everybody down to the west is going to get a benefit from the sand in the littoral transport system. So it's not really adversely affecting anything, especially since we placed a bunch of sand above mean high water, and that's already eroded down into the nearshore area. So that sediment and sand that was placed above is already adding to and going over those very organisms that you're concerned about. So because of the nature of the area and it's how dynamic it is also a reason why I think there's not as much wildlife in that location, because of the surf, as opposed to the bayside, where there's not as big as, there is a big surf during storms, but during regular events, it's much less. So I still wish the commission would look at it in an open mind and assist this particular property owner and taxpayer of the town, some method of trying to protect his investment as well as us using experts to show what we're trying to do won't detrimentally or adversely affect the resource areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. If I could just follow up on one of those comments. Sorry, was that, well, I'll get back. Is that Ernie that wanted to speak?
No, it was Sam. It was Sam.
Yeah, okay. If I could just follow up while I have my line of thought here. I think what's happened when you have the nourishment above mean high water, it's a slow process, it's incremental, and it probably does not impact aquatic resources that are living in the intertidal area. But when you put large amounts in one event, you will absolutely have smothering. And I've seen it at West Dennis Beach in Dennis, and I saw it at Red River Beach in Harwich, where it happened, and you had loss of aquatic life because of this nourishment below mean high water. So I have a hard time reading the performance standards for land under the ocean and seeing how it's acceptable to do that. I think that if we had eelgrass, if we had quahogs, we wouldn't even be thinking about it. But we have other creatures that are not quite as obvious. So I think that's the difference there. Stan, sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. Thanks, Brad. No, it's just interesting, Don, your comment that here we just replenished all that sand above mean high water and it's already washing away, which is basically my whole issue with any nourishment.
Yeah, it's a good point, Stan. But remember, that sand that was sacrificed, the owner knows it's sacrificial in nature, so he didn't lose more of his dune. And it didn't, and the ocean didn't creep closer to his houses. So it's a trade-off. It's an unfortunate trade-off, but some people, this is all that they have.
You just said something else that was interesting to me, though. You said the sand was washing. So if you repair the groins, will that sand from above be what you need for down below? It's going to automatically replenish.
Sure, it will to some extent, of course. Yeah. That's the reason for putting it above mean high, because right now Harwich doesn't allow us to put it below. So we're going to have to do what we need to do above as much as we can. But it just seems to me to make more sense to, you've got a resource area. It's called a coastal beach. If we create a coastal beach with the right slope, that it not only is going to be beneficial to the resource area itself, but it's going to be beneficial to the homeowner because it knocks down waves sooner than it gets to the dune. So therefore it preserves the dune longer. And then the groins, they'll trap the sand so it stays on his property longer. So it seems to me it's a win-win all the way around, except I understand Brad's brought up that there's some organisms that could be buried, and I don't want to make them any less important than the rest of the wildlife habitat out there. The Army Corps does indicate that a project like this, with the depth that we're proposing of sand, which is not a lot of sand because most of it's going above mean high water, but in the area that's between the fence that's there now and the mean high water line, if you look at section BB. But the Army Corps says that those organisms recover within 1 year. So, we're talking about a short period of time. And all due respect, I realize that it looks like a large volume of sand. The volume numbers are high, but it's spread over a 700 plus foot area. It's not a lot of sand in terms of thickness. We're just trying to get the grade, the slope, to be less than the steep slope that gets created during the winter. That's kind of what we want to try to accomplish.
I guess what I'm getting at is that sand from above mean high water, isn't that going to gradually do that, what you're looking for? Because I've seen one beach there in just over the line in Chatham there, just east of Red River. There's a home there where they've dredged and pumped in sand there a few years ago. And I mean, it's changed the whole nature of the whole beachfront and the water levels there. And it's really changed the whole slope.
Well, that location isn't this location because we have they don't have many groins down in that location, I think. If I remember correctly, past Red River, this has a number of groins on either side of actually the property lines, substantial groins that are going to contain the sediment. But yes, some of the sand comes down off of the bank of dune and does replenish the beach. But if you notice, that does not push the mean high water line out. The mean high water line pretty much stays right where it is, even though that sand is eroding, because it like Brad says, it takes it in small amounts, which we understand. What we're trying to do with this sediment is create a beach slope between the groins in hopes that the groins, when reconstructed, will keep the sand in place for a period of time, and also create a slope where we've got wave action that's lessened based on the fact that the wave will feel the bottom sooner than it feels it now, so that it knocks the wave down sooner before it gets to the dune.
If I can add a comment, there are studies that show that the small crabs can tolerate a fine veneer of sediment. They are subjected to sediment washing in naturally. These organisms have adapted to this intertidal habitat of sand moving about and sand dunes shifting. So they can recover very rapidly. They're adapted to rapid recovery, and their larval set will replenish in the following year or in the same year. So you're talking about a type of ecosystem that's been adapted to dynamic intertidal habitat. So I think while they're there, I think they'll have the capability to, a sediment that's a foot or less, they bury into the sediment anyway. So they're going to come up from the beach, and anything that might be lost in the process of replenishing this area, it's not shellfish that's going to be lost. There really was no shellfish that was found. It will be recovered with, as Dawn mentioned, in a year, as studies suggest by the Army Corps and other scientific studies that we can point to. This is an ecosystem that's developed over its existence to adapt to these kinds of dynamic conditions.
I'd just like to add, if I could. Good evening, everyone. Dave Requena, the contractor for Mr. and Mrs. Judge. First of all, I want to thank Don Monroe and Pam Nuber for doing such a great job on this project. We started, I believe, back in last October, and this is either the 8th or the 9th meeting with the board for this project, and I believe we're on about 8 months now, possibly going on 9 months. Mr. and Mrs. Judge have done everything you have asked, and they have not complained a bit. Okay, we have come in front of the board, and I've asked for clear guidance at other meetings. I asked for whatever guidance you could give us, and I have been reassured at times that we would handle it at the next meeting. I've been asked for specific reports, specific information, and I've been told that we can vote on this at the next meeting if you give us this information. Come to the next meeting, and then we are asked to continue again. The judges are happy to assist. They're happy to give you any information, but a lot of the information, with all due respect, that's been asked for tonight, or that's been mentioned tonight, was known at other meetings, and then we were asked to spend more money and additional thousands of dollars for studies and reports that we had Coastal Engineering come in and do. Pam Nuber came in and did her report, and the information was all favorable. And now, even with the favorable information, after all this time, you're still telling us that it isn't good enough. I think it's unfair to the owners of the property for how much time and how much money they have spent and invested on this. And I think they only want to improve the beach. They're not asking for anything more than what they have. They're just trying to repair what they currently have. And I think asking them to commit more resources and additional money at this time is unfair. I think they deserve to complete their project. And I would ask that the board give us a favorable determination after all the effort that the owners of this property have put in. I would ask that we give them something in return.
I appreciate your perspective, David. I think your team has done a tremendous job to go out and conduct these surveys and provide all this information. But, if we look at the transcripts for the previous hearing, I think that I and another member or two was very clear that we did not support this particular practice. And again, in 11 and 12 years on the commission, I've only seen one vote in favor of nourishment below mean high water mark in Harwich. So it's not a common practice. Greg Berman is clear that there's some hurdles for this practice. And again, you did the surveys, and if they came back positive, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, I don't believe. So I don't feel like it's a big surprise, and I'm totally in favor of voting tonight and not continuing this. So if to me, there's two actions here, and one is the groins or the jetties, and to me, I would love to see them disappear. We had that discussion last time. We talked about that, and Don felt it wasn't really in anyone's interest to do that. And I think they are permitted structures. So if the proponent wants to replace them, they can. So I don't feel quite as strongly about the jetties, even though I think they aren't really doing a lot of good other than maybe holding some sand between the two narrow ones. But that's kind of what I think we're looking at is if, we could vote on the whole project as it is. We could vote to approve the jetties and the nourishment or not the nourishment. What do you guys feel like moving forward on? Do you want just a straight up vote on the whole project?
Well, it doesn't sound like that's going to work in our favor at this point. And I think those jetties are highly necessary, Brad. If you own that property and you didn't have those jetties, there wouldn't be a dune left, in my feeling. I think they prevent some of that erosion. I think they help to hold some of that sand in place. And if we don't repair those dunes, all the sand is going to shift. It ebbs and flows. It comes in and it goes out. But we have to do the best we can. I don't think it's ever perfect. And it's not ever going to stay in one place either, Stan. It is going to gravitate, but I think we have to do what we can to hold that sand in place as long as we can, so that they have a beach and so that they can enjoy their property. So personally, my feeling right now, and I'll ask Don and anyone else to chime in. I just think that if we vote on the whole project right now, I don't know that that's going to work too well for us. And
well, one option is to remove, the nourishment below mean high water. Another option is to continue with discussion with the ownership. Well, we could vote on the whole project. I think it's tough to turn back the clock. All those jetties to the west are impacting this property. And so when I say I'd like to remove them, removing them in isolation wouldn't help things that much. So it's really just all these jetties stacked up on each other that's causing the problem. So
if I could, I guess my heartburn in this case is, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if we knew this already, my understanding at the last meeting when you asked for all the surveys was that, we were getting closer to a good vote, a positive vote. And I think, you had asked for the information in order to help us get to that vote. if a few members already knew that they were going to vote in opposition of this, why did we ask the ownership of this project to spend thousands of dollars more for the same result? You know, I guess that's what I'm having the biggest issue with, is at the end of the day, if the vote was going to be the same either way, why did we go down this road?
Yeah, I can't tell you what the vote's going to be, honestly, but I felt that myself and a few others were pretty transparent last time, you know, explaining exactly how we felt about what you were asking to do. And I think that the project wanted to look at the eelgrass issue because they felt it would really help them with additional permits. And from my perspective, seeing that information either way would be very helpful as well. Obviously, if the eelgrass was there, you couldn't do it. It'd be a non-starter. So I don't think there's any surprises here from my perspective. I just think it's a question of where the votes are going to fall.
Can I ask a question to Dawn? Do you want to, are there ideas that you might have that continuance would benefit the project? I mean, do you want to think about things a little bit more, perhaps from an engineering perspective, or?
Well, I think we should respect.
I wasn't at the last hearing, so I don't know how things were transpired.
Through the chair, I think it would be fair to the client and the applicant to at least have us bring back what the results are thus far, as opposed to having a vote for something that is part or not part of this particular presentation. They should have the right to decide that. I also would like to just take a little moment just to go back over a couple of items, not to, like Dave said, not to beat a dead horse, although back when these actually groins, because they're not protecting a channel, back when these were designed by the state, back in the 40s and 50s, they were designed with a specific purpose, which was to entrap sand. And part of the design, if you go back to the original documents and plans that were prepared by the DPW back in the day when they were actually the permitting and the licensing agency for the state, which now is your DEP, the original design was to fill the groins up to entrapment, which means to the outer tips of each one of the groins, sand would be placed from the area which is now the dune out to the tip of the groins. That was part of the original design. But the state realized after they built the groins, if you go back through the literature, they ran out of funding and didn't have the wherewithal to actually keep and continue to place sand out to the tips of the groins. If that were the case, if they actually followed through with all of it, then your erosion and your sediment transport would be along the tips of the groins. That was the idea and the design, as opposed to the literal transport now and the erosion taking place and scalloping out the sand from inside the groins. The sediment transport would be pushed out towards the tips. So that's the effort that the judges are trying to make in their little microcosm of these groins that they now are kind of responsible for because the state has abandoned them. Dave Hill has indicated that anybody that has a groin on their property, they would certainly welcome them to rebuild them. They would license them in those particular people's names. They still see that there's a benefit to the groins. The problem is that they don't have funding and they can't be the ones that place the sand based on the original design. So that's just a little background in terms of why we've even approached this. I find it, and then one more point, I find it interesting that we've come back and demonstrated exactly what the shellfish constable indicated, that there was no shellfish in this location. The town doesn't seed it. We went away with the idea that if we found eelgrass or we found shellfish, then we would understand that it's a no-starter. But through the chair, it was already stated that if that were the case, it would be a non-starter. Well, on the other flip side of the coin is then it should be a starter, since we haven't found any of those items that would be of concern. So I just find it, and I share with Dave the perplexity from the applicant and from an engineering and a resource area management perspective, that what we've shown you is exactly what would make this a starting project instead of a non-starter. Because I do agree with Brad, if we found shellfish and we found eelgrass, then yeah, we'd be in dire straits. But since we aren't, why can't the commission look at this in a different light? Why can't they look at this as an avenue for potentially your own town that has to dredge the channels, possibly helping and assisting their 4 miles of coastline by looking at this particular project, if it works, that they could also join in and put sand below mean high water and move mean high water line out. But that doesn't mean destroy all the wildlife. You're moving it out in a movement that goes from the landward side of everything to the seaward side. It's not like the sand's going to destroy everything, because you're moving the actual mean high water line by this design from one location to another, so the habitat will shift. It's been shown to be done. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, Don, and I think it's a reasonable position, and I fully understand your perspective. I think I have a little different one from just observing projects in the past have acute impacts from this type of nourishment. And I think, again, our performance standards ask for no adverse impacts on marine fishery habitat or wildlife habitat. So that's why I don't support it. I think the public benefit is very narrow, and it really benefits the one property owner. And again, I think that response is very short-lived. So I don't think it's worth impacting public resources for that purpose. So, and I apologize if I wasn't clear last time. I thought I was. I thought I was pretty clear that not just myself, but this commission has rarely voted in approval for nourishment below mean high water mark. So I don't see a surprise here.
Okay, Brad, just one question for you. You made a comment that this would impair public resources below mean high water. We're just, Pam has suggested that it wouldn't, from her perspective. So, and is that, given this small scope of this particular area, would that really be an impact on public resources?
It's a very good point, Ernie, and I think the cases where I've seen what I consider significant impacts, there have been greater diversity of aquatic life that was smothered and wiped out with that activity. I think that you would see recolonization of some of these species, but and I think that the studies that will show that you can have recolonization. But again, for the benefits gained here, I don't think it's worth impacting, public subtidal and intertidal habitats. I just think a couple winter storms and everything that was done is gone.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm Don, you had mentioned too that the original intent of these groins was that the government would continue to maintain the sand out to the tip of the groins. It's not happening. So, what's the cumulative impact of across the whole 4 mile of Harwich waterfront, where nobody's doing this other than this one property owner, perhaps? Is there any beneficial impact to this other than to this one particular homeowner?
Through the chair to that question, the amount of sand we're talking about placing is very insignificant to the shoreline, but it is significant to the property owner. So, 2,500 cubic yards, I think this a fair estimate, the amount of sand that moves up and down the 4 mile shoreline of Harwich is probably on the order of 2 to 3 million cubic yards, probably every week. So this is not going to be a significant adverse effect to any resource areas based on the percentage that this is compared to the amount of sand that moves along this coastline. So, but it is a benefit to the homeowner. So yeah, that's the juxtaposition of every project is certainly the homeowner, almost every project that comes in front of conservation, the homeowner gets a benefit. That's a given because they own shorefront property. But the Wetlands Protection Act doesn't, and I don't think was enacted to deny a person the right to work with the resource areas. I think that's what an order of conditions does. It conditions the project such that you meet the performance standards with those conditions. And I think we've demonstrated that the wildlife habitat here is severely lacking. It's not to say there aren't some. The resource areas are also severely lacking because the dune is in dire straits until he placed sand on it. The vegetation is not doing well, and the beach profile is not doing well. So everything I think the owner's trying to do isn't just a benefit to himself, it's a benefit to the resource areas, but there's a minimal amount of gain that the public's going to gain here because it's such a small amount of sand. So on that note, I don't think it's going to be a detriment to the public either because the sand's so small an amount. The greatest benefit is going to be to the homeowner in this case.
So what I hear you saying is that the homeowner is going to throw a lot of money at replenishing this sand. It's going to have, based on Pamela's assessment too, is that it'd be minimal impact on the aquatic life in this area. Eventually it'll go away. Won't have any impact on the rest of the homeowners on the 4-mile stretch of Harwich. And if he wants to throw his money into the water, then, you know, so be it. Does that sum it up?
In a nutshell, you kind of got it, yes. It is the homeowner's expense. Unfortunately, because there's a dune in front of this property, even though it's a pre-78 status property, which if there weren't a dune in front of this property, you could put a revetment here. And then you'd be looking at a revetment and probably not liking that. And that would definitely go through appeal because it's a pre-78 status, even though there was rebuild. So the rebuild doesn't take away his right to protect, but the dune does. So he's stuck with, not stuck with, but he's faced with, these are his options currently. And, you know, so this is what he'd like to try to do. You know, it's almost like in Chatham where they've got coastal banks and the Chatham Conservation Commission likes people to experiment and start with soft solutions as protection first. They spend a lot of money because they ultimately know they're going to have to get to the revetment phase, but it's money they know they have to spend to get there. So this is, you know, in a roundabout way similar. He knows he's got to do something. He's got some rock protection through the groins. So if he enhances that, he will possibly, in a good percentage on his behalf, maintain and retain some of the sand that's placed as we've designed it on the plans that we've presented.
And to follow up on Dawn's comment, Amy did mention there would be conditions that she would prepare that we would discuss. And review. And it's, you know, it's resiliency. The times are changing here on our coastal habitats. As much as we need to improve our water quality, and I think the town is doing a good job with that, and I've said that before, we need to come into a realization that also times are changing from a coastal resiliency perspective, and we need to think about, you know, we need to think about how we're going to protect our habitats, our dune habitats, in light of climate change. And this is an option. As Dawn mentioned, it's not a lot of sand, but it's an option to help protect the resources that are there and existing.
The judge is willing to put his own money up to help that as well. So, I mean, I think we have to look at that. I absolutely think that in this case, the benefits far outweigh any kind of detriment that could come from this project. you know, I just need to reinforce that we've done the research, we've done the studies. Everything has come back in Mr. Judge's favor, Mr. and Mrs. Judge's favor. And I personally, for one, I don't see the detriment. I don't see where any harm could come from this. And from everything that I've heard and everything that I've seen on site and from all the professionals who do this for a living, I haven't heard any detriment that could come from this.
Well, to Don's prior point too, were these groins still under the purview of the government, they'd be doing this sand replenishment anyhow, right?
They had the money and the wherewithal, probably back in the 50s and 60s, they might have attempted it, but they probably realized how many thousands of cubic yards they were going to have to come up with, and where was the source going to be. So I'm sure it was a, you know, a good effort and a start to try to protect the coastline, but it fell short. I think at this point, I'm not the judges, but I think it would be fair to them for a continuation, because we should, as a project team, allow them to hear what we bring back from the commission to make a decision. And at the same time, it would give us, the design team, a chance to put on our thinking caps, I guess. And it would also give us an opportunity, because I think there's one or two members that were on the original amended order of conditions request that aren't here. So if we ask for a vote tonight, it might be not in the judge's favor, but if we had the other two members, it could read in on this particular meeting and be available at the next meeting, that might assist the judges, because it would be, you know, fair to have more people that would be willing to vote and may vote differently than just the numbers that we have here tonight. And I say that respectfully. I understand everybody's position. I understand everybody's concern. We're trying to balance, and we're doing all that we can, so I understand. But I think a continuance would be appropriate. I don't know what you think, Dave and Pam.
If I could, Amy, speaking to you through the chair, would it be possible to vote on the groin reconstruction today, keeping it as one project, and continue a vote on the sand nourishment below high water?
What you could do is you could ask for a vote on the groins, but it would have to come back as an amendment. So technically the file is still open, but you'd have to, that would be the way that the avenue that you would come back.
Okay. I'm only asking that because even if we have a vote today, we still have a Chapter 91 process that we have to go through, as you know. So correct. I mean, we'd like to perform this work early 2021, January, February. So I'm just looking at time frames by the time we get through the state and, you know, everything else that we have to do. You know, I ideally would like to get the Chapter 91 process started. So I'm wondering if we can't get a vote, because, you know, and if I'm out of line here, please let me know, anyone. But I think it looks to me like we have somewhat of a favorable vote on the groin reconstruction. I think the major question is nourishment below high water. So, Don, if you could chime in on this,
Yeah,
I'd like to know your thoughts.
Yeah, through the chair, Brad, let me throw a thought out there for the commission to think about in the next 10 minutes or so. So one of the options would be right now to withdraw the nourishment below mean high water without prejudice, so that we could come back under an amendment to bring that back to the commission for further discussion or whatever. But keep the groin reconstruction on this particular application and vote on it. And then we just have to revise the plan. So you could vote on it tonight, knowing that the nourishment would be taken off if we verbally say that we'll be taking it off without prejudice. Isn't that an option, Amy?
Yeah, I certainly don't object to that approach, as long as it's procedurally correct, and that Amy would know that more than I would.
Yep, you could do that. What we would just ask you to do is if that was the vote tonight, or if you decided to withdraw that portion of the application and we voted just on the groins, is that you just change the plan a little bit and take off the nourishment for this, and that way we could draft the order as such that it would just be for the groins, and then you would have the ability in the future to come back with an amendment for the sand. So we could, yeah, as long as you had plans available for our next meeting that showed that the sand nourishment was taken off, I would be comfortable with that approach.
So if we got tonight, I apologize, Amy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so if we vote tonight on the groin reconstruction and a nourishment above mean high water, just to kind of clean up the beach a little bit.
Well, you have that. You have that ability to nourish above.
We have that piece, right? So, so if we got that vote tonight, when could we start the 91 process in this case? Or would you want us to come back with the amended plan prior to a vote? I guess that's the piece I'm trying to decipher.
Well, that's really up to 91, how they want to look at it, because typically Chapter 91 is required for anything below mean high water. So that's not just groins, but that's sand nourishment as well. So, I mean, I don't know how they feel about fragmenting projects necessarily. I don't think it would preclude you from starting the process with them, though.
Yeah, we could make a Dave, through the chair to Dave and Amy. If we withdraw the sand nourishment without prejudice, then it really isn't even part of the project anymore, unless we come back with another amendment. And the groins stay as part of this amendment application, so it's a standalone. It may seem like it's segmenting, but I don't think it's segmenting because the size of the project is small. That usually comes under MEPA review, that they don't like segmenting. This is just an avenue of discussion with the commission to see what we can get approved to start the 91, but we would go through the whole 91 process with the groins, and then Brendan Mulvaney up at DEP, who reviews these now, would ask probably for us to amend the license application if we sometime in the future got nourishment below mean high water. It would be an amendment process similar to amendment order. So
I wasn't sure if you were gonna, oh, okay. I was a little confused. That's fine.
Brad, did you get that, Brad?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think it gives the project the ability to start on a few things now. I would think I would just run through all the commissioners again and ask them specifically how they feel about the groin project, or if they had any questions. I have a question: do they presently hold a Chapter 91?
Yes, yes, Brad, they do. It is called a DPW contract plan that has a contract number, and we got a reading from Ken Chin when he was at DEP that those are a standing license because they were produced and signed off by the DPW back in the 1940s and 50s when they were the issuing and licensing authority at the time.
Right, right. I know that numerous of these, groins and jetties were privately constructed. They were not all constructed by the public agency back then. So I don't know if that's important or not, but either way, my view is that they're permitted. The owner is entitled to rebuild them if they want to. And so, again, in a perfect world, would start removing some of these structures, but you'd have to remove a lot to really make a difference. So that's my feeling. I'll run through everyone quickly to see if anyone has any comments or questions. Stan, do you have any comments on the groins only?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, John?
No.
All right. Ernie?
No, I'm fine with groins only.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, my personal feeling is that those groins all along that Nantucket Sound just really didn't work out well. They've just been kind of a mess for the past half century or so. And a lot of them are starting to just kind of disappear. And I'd hate to see them all rebuilt, so I'm not particularly in favor of.
Okay.
Amy, is it possible to take a 2-minute recess, or?
That would be up to the chairman.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mind going forward with, if you guys want to vote on the Groins only, I'd like to go ahead with that tonight. And, you know, if you want to continue or withdraw the other segment, that's fine. But, you know, I think, you know, if you guys want to talk it over for a couple minutes, that's fine. But I would like to move this forward. We've had a lot of discussion.
Yeah, I agree, Brad. We have had a lot of discussion, and I'm kind of walking on eggshells here a little bit, and I think a few of us are, because it's been almost 9 months of going back and forth, and there's been a lot of investment in this, and this is a tough call to make, you know, because if we choose the wrong door, if you will, it could end. It could end everything right now. So I would love to take a 2-minute recess for a phone call. If you wouldn't mind, maybe we can come back in 2 minutes.
Take what you need, you know, 5-10 minutes, whatever you guys need. We'll have a recess for this hearing, and we'll take up some other business. Is that okay?
Yeah, we don't have that much other business. So just so you know, we don't have that much other things on the agenda. So we'll only be on for another few minutes.
Okay, so I think 5-10 max.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys.
9:02.
Okay, thank you.
You know, take what you need. Take what you need.
All right,
and all right, thank you. Amy, I guess we could take care of an order. Is that what we should do?
We got 2 orders, Mr. Chair. Let me just bring it up on the other screen in case you have any edits. Want to do 220 Long Pond first. So for 220 Long Pond Drive, they minimized the walkway to 4 feet, and they proposed only 8 feet of disturbance on either side, and they're planting with natives. So I think that was what the commission wanted. Getting some feedback here.
Oh, I don't hear him.
Brad?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, did you want me to say something or no?
Oh, hey, Rocky. You don't have to, but you're welcome to if you'd like to. The applicant's representative is here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm pretty much in agreement with what you just said, so I'll just go quiet. All right?
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone has comments on the set of orders, just speak up. I don't have any myself.
Yeah, I don't have any comments on the bread.
Me neither.
I don't have anything.
All right, then I move that we accept the order. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing. I actually can't pull it up right this minute, but did a condition about no fertilizer make it on there?
It did. No fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides are permitted within the wetland or 100-foot buffer zone. Remain in perpetuity, not
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. All right, well, then I move that we accept the order of conditions for 220 Long Pond Road.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ernie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries.
I think our 6 and 10 Neil might already be back.
Okay, you guys are back?
We're back.
Fastest 10 minutes you've ever seen, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens at 9:01 at night.
Go ahead, Dave.
So we would like to vote on the growing reconstruction. And we're going to withdraw without prejudice the sand nourishment below mean high water. And that's the way we would like to proceed.
Okay, that's reasonable. Okay, so we have a request for amended order of conditions. Is that the vehicle, Amy?
Yep, it's an amended order of conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amended order of conditions. And what is proposed is to replace the two groins as shown in the design plans, with the nourishment below mean high water mark being withdrawn without prejudice. And so,
question, Brad, there are 3 groins on the property. They're only doing 2?
Correct.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, those 2 that are very close together.
Yep.
And so I guess I'll call for a motion, and then we can have a little discussion if we have a second. So if somebody would like to make a motion on this.
Yeah, I move we approve the request for an amended order of conditions for Neal Road to repair the 2 groins on the property that have been requested.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by John. So just a little bit of discussion. And it would be nice to take care of both issues at once, but I think this is probably a reasonable approach by withdrawing the nourishment point. One thought that I had was that maybe the nourishment could go forward with mitigation for impacts to marine habitats by having one or more of the groins not replaced. But that's not being proposed, and so I think I just wanted to put that concept out there as something that I had considered. But any other discussion?
Yeah, Brad, another concept would be to do the mitigation or the replenishment in phases, so that it's as opposed to putting it all down at once, they put it down in layers.
That's a good interjection.
It's we don't have very good access in between the groins, so the only access point is we would have to do it kind of at the same time. Don, do you agree? Because the only way we can get in between the groins is when the groins are being reconstructed, unless it was pumped in. The only other method.
We have some other contractors that can build a ramp, on one side and on the other side of the groins to protect them and then get in between. That's a method I've seen used. They actually even use that when they do the nourishment for the town. When they pump onto public beaches, they'll build ramps to get over the groins.
Right.
It's a good concept. I think it would come up if they chose to bring back that nourishment at a later date. So, any other thoughts under discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so that's a nay for you, Jim? So
Yes, it's a nay. Yeah.
Okay, so the motion carries 4-1. Oh, excuse me, 3-1.
No, 4-1.
No, 4-1.
Yeah, 4-1. Okay. All right. Well, I think that moves things ahead a little bit.
Thank you through the chair, and Amy, I'll get you that revised plan in the next couple of days. Is that okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And it's good to see that everybody's healthy, so stay healthy.
Yeah, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have another order on 33 Snow Inn Road to consider, Amy?
Yep. Let me go back to that. Just make sure if you have any questions. Yep, Van Helfrich, 33 Snow Inn Road. This was a dead man tieback system and access improvements. Why won't it let me do this? Anybody have any comments?
Yeah, this is all done, right?
Yes, this was, yes, it's all done.
Yeah, okay.
So this is just an amendment. This is just the amendment. So there's really only 2 new conditions, that there's a new plan of record and all the other conditions remain in effect.
All right. Yeah, I have no comments on the order.
All right.
All right. All those in favor of approval of the order conditions for 33 Snow Inn Road, say, oh, excuse me. Let me make a motion first. I move that we accept the order conditions for 33 Snow Inn Road. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Okay. And we have, I guess, one cert.
Well, it's 2 certs for the same property. And this was the, okay, it's the building almost across from Dairy Queen on Route 28. These are just reissuances. They must have a buyer for the property, but they want to clean up the deed, and they realized that they lost the original certs of compliance. And, you know, we reviewed, so everything is in the same state that it's been in for a very long time, and the buildings do comply with what the plan showed. So these are simple reissuances. The commission, you know, several years ago granted the certificates of compliance. They just lost it. So we need new ones. So if you would vote to approve that, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I move we approve the certificate of compliance for both parcels at 423 Route 28. Have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries.
Got one
Alrighty,
set
I
of,
guess we have one
sorry.
set.
Yep.
Okay,
May 21st.
I don't see them in my lot Dropbox.
We're at the very end.
Oh,
Hold on one second. I got them in mine. So it's item V.
the last thing that I can scroll down to is you, and you.
Weird.
And I can't go any further.
I had problems earlier today with my Dropbox updating.
It's not the end of the world if you want to.
Log in on the web.
Okay, now I can get at it.
It's up to you if you want to do them tonight or if you want to put it off. It's up to you. If you want to take a couple minutes, they're not that long, 3 pages. Or if you'd rather put it off till next time, that's fine. Sorry, my cat's screaming.
Hey, Amy, have the police said anything about Robbins Road area? Can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because of the creatures. We're going to do a site visit next week with PD, fire, and DPW, and I invited Jim as well since he knows the area well. So I just sent that email today. There's been a lot to do since coming back from a week off last week, so they all want to go. But we're going to do that next week. And DPW has taken over the mowing, just so you know, the mowing around the Bell's Neck
And Amy, just to get back to you, I should be available pretty much any time for that Robbins Pond area.
Yeah, I mean, is any time of the day best for you, Jim?
Honestly, midday to late day, any time's fine. Other than the early morning, like between.
So maybe like
right
after lunch would be okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Lunchtime. All right. So that's the fire and police got back to me and said basically any day but Friday. So I'll look at my calendar. And we'll pick another day next week to do around lunchtime.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
And Liz also took a video of the plover babies.
Oh yeah.
Bank Street. Yeah. So if you want to, I can have her forward it to you, and you can send it to everybody, just so they can see what these little guys are. They're hysterical, absolutely hysterical.
Yeah. So the commission knows. Sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, how do folks feel about the minutes for May 21st? Do you want to go ahead, or I've been through them. I just have a real minor typo.
Go ahead.
Let's see, under discussion, possible vote, 510 Pleasant Lake Avenue. The first sentence, the homeowner, you got to add a R, remove trees and stumps. And then I think you need something in front of brought, either semicolon or and brought in. Just a little bit of work on that first sentence.
Oh, I see it. Sorry. Yeah.
And that's about it. I mean, we talked a lot about the bogs. We could add more detail, but I think we all know what we want to do there.
Yeah. In case you can hear that, that's Meow, the cat.
Wants to be fed.
Yeah, pretty much. It's morning and nighttime feedings.
Jim, were you able to look at the minutes for the Bells Neck Conservation Area discussion?
No, I actually haven't been able to review those.
Okay. Well, then I guess, what do you think, Amy? Is it okay to put this off?
It's fine. I mean, minutes don't take long at the end of an agenda. We look like we have a stacked agenda with a lot of continuances, but I'm sure, like, who knows if the docs will go on. We got one new filing in, and that was it. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do them next time. I'd rather you be able to digest them. So.
Yeah, I think they're close. I just think it'd be good to have Mark and Jim look closely at the Bells Neck language.
And by then we'll have another set or two as well.
Okay.
If he wasn't able, she held down the fort while I was gone, so she wasn't able to get the February 5th minutes done yet.
Okay. Well, all right. Any new business?
Just a question for Amy. You sent out those letters on the floats. Any responses or anything?
I did get a call from one person on Old Mill Point, or in Old Mill Point, and said that it's in now, but that when in the late summer they want to have me over and discuss a better location to put that. So they said they completely understood why, and they're happy to comply. They just said they've been doing it since forever that way, but they're happy to change.
Okay.
So next we'll do Witchmere again. We sent 6 out, and the 6 that you gave us in Herring River. So I'll follow up. I didn't hear from anybody else, but we'll follow up in the fall. They all got delivered. We didn't get any back.
Yeah, I was just curious if.
Yeah. No, I have high hopes that we'll start seeing that improve. Oh.
Well, with my new phone, I'll be able to take even better evidence in the future.
Oh, wonderful. That's good. Thank you for doing that. That's what we got right now. Oh, so just to let the whole commission know, I'll let Paula or Carolyn and Mark know. It does look like we're going to be doing online stuff for another at least meeting or two. The commission could potentially be meeting in the Griffin room, but it's going to be a while, I was told by the health director, before the general public are allowed to come into meetings. And then also there's the challenge of being down one videographer and having all these public meetings too. So it's just easier on channel 18 right now and complying with COVID to do this for another, we'll see where we're at in another meeting or two with things, but we just don't have the resources to be doing in-person meetings just yet. But on other news, Town Hall is officially opening. It's going to be by appointment, but we can have up to 16 other people other than staff in the building at one time, as of Monday. So the whole place has been retrofitted. People have been moved. We're getting there.
All right, it'll be fun when we get together again.
It will.
This is working pretty well, but it's not the same.
It's not.
No. But thank you and Nick for everything. I think you guys are just making it possible, so I really appreciate that.
Problem. Trying.
Yeah, no, everybody's chipping in. Any other things before we adjourn?
Nope.
Well, I move that we adjourn tonight.
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, thanks.